Hi students, in this video I'll continue from the earlier video because I had to stop uh, due to the day sub training outside. So in this video I'll first begin with national saving. So national saving is nothing but the saving of the economy as a whole, and it is equal to the sum of private saving and public savings. And private saving is nothing but disposable income minus consumption, and disposable income is nothing but the income after paying all taxes. uh, Public saving is given by government revenue minus government spending. So you can understand the concept of national saving further from this figure. So you can see uh, this figure actually shows the circular flow of Newton through economy. Uh, there are the key players here, the household, government and firms, and there are the different markets where the transactions actually happen. So you can see the households get the income, for example, by contributing labor to the firm here. Uh, with the payment from the firm as factor payment to the households here. So the households get the income here, and that income gets divided into the private saving, taxes and consumption. Whatever households earn after paying the taxes, you have the disposable income, and whatever is left over after the consumption of the goods and services from the markets for goods and services, then you have the savings here, which is the private saving here. And the public saving here is nothing but again government revenue minus government purchase. So government revenue is represented by this here, taxes. So government earns revenue through taxes and other investment um, projects. uh, and the public saving here is equal to nothing but the government revenue here, which is earned from this source here minus the government purchases here. So this is how the national income or national saving works. So the savings, private savings plus the public savings here. Whatever private or public, whatever the individual people say is then invested in financial market, and also whatever public saving is there is also invested in financial market, and that savings in the financial market goes out as investment for the purchase of goods and services by the firms or households or government, and that becomes the investment here. Now to move on, uh, let us talk about nominal and real GDP. Nominal GDP and real GDP. So nominal GDP is the GDP calculated based on the prevailing price of goods and services in a given time period. So you can see the nominal GDP calculated here for the year 1, which is equal to the price of good, for example X, which is $10, into the quantity of good X, which is 100 units here, and the GDP for year 1 is equal to $1,000. The sum total of GDP, sum total of good produced, for example good X here, taking an example of just one good here, which is good X here, and it's equal to $1,000 here. And for the second year, the GDP is 1,440. For the third year, it is 1,960. And if you observe here, the price of good X is increasing, and also the quantity of good X is increasing. Suppose in the year 2, if the quantity of good produced remains same as year 1, which is equal to 100 here, then the GDP here for year 2 will be 1,200 instead of 1,440. But the problem is that you can see that in year 2, although the quantity produced is remaining same as year 1, the GDP is increasing, and that is how the general public gets misled with this nominal GDP. So the general public, by looking at the nominal GDP of year 2, will feel that there is an increase in GDP, and the increase in GDP is not because of increase in the production, but it is because of the increase in the price of the product in year 2, and it is because of inflation, and that gives a wrong picture to the people. People will think that there is an increase in GDP, but there is the increase in real GDP is not real increase. The increase in GDP is because of the increase in the price, or because of the decrease in the purchasing power of the money. So this nominal GDP is sometimes misleading. So because of that, real GDP is used, and real GDP is calculated based on what is called base year's price of good. So in this example, the base year is year 1. So you can choose any base year. A base year is a reference year based on which you can actually calculate the real GDP and compare the GDP compare the future GDP or past GDP. So real GDP actually gives a better picture of the change in the GDP. So because the GDP, the change in GDP is solely because of the change in the quantity of goods and services produced within an economy over a period of time. And that is what we want to see actually. We want to see that the economic activity is increased. So we want to see whether the increase in GDP is because of increased uh, economic activity and not because of no change in the uh, purchasing power of money. So you can see the real GDP here calculated for year 1, year 2 and year 3. And year 2 also you can see it is calculated based on the base year's price of good, which is 10 here, and year 3, for year 3 also it is calculated based on the base year's price of $10. So you can see the change in the GDP here, and the change in the GDP here is because of the change in the quantity produced, which is 100, 120 and 140. So you can see that no, the change in economy or improvement in the economic output of a country is because of the change in the economic activity or increased economic activity or increased production of goods and services, not because of change in the purchase, not because of the change in the price of goods. So this gives a better picture of how an economy is changing. Now to move on, let us talk about money. So money is nothing but stock of assets that can be readily used to make transactions. And for Bhutan, we can say that Nultrums or the uh, paper currencies and coins in the hands of public as the nation's stock of money. And money has three functions. So money serves as a store of value, money serves as a unit of account, and money serves as a medium of exchange. So now to look into the details of each of them. As a store of value, actually the store of value of money refers to the ability of money to hold value over time. So uh, if you observe, you can see that money 100 Newton that you have just now can be used to purchase uh, some product in the future, same quantity the of a particular product in the future with 100 Newton. If there is uh, no change in the inflation, for example. So if I work today and earn 100 Newton, I can hold the money and spend it tomorrow, next month, or next week. And the value of the money is there. For example, if there is, if the value, if the purchasing power of money remains same uh, till next week, then whatever quantity of the goods and services that you can purchase now, you can purchase that same quantity of goods and services next week. So then you can see that the money is actually storing the value. The value of the money is being stored. Now to talk about the function of money as a unit of account. So as a unit of account, money provides a common measurement of the relative value of goods and services. So it provides a common measure of the relative value of goods and services. Because of the function of money as a unit of account, we can actually compare and find out whether a bushel of wheat is worth one or two or more pairs of shoes. So for example, here you can see if the price of one pizza is Newton 300 and the price of a movie ticket is 100, then the value of one pizza is equal to 3 movie tickets. So in this way we can compare actually the relative value of one good over other. So you can see the relative value of pizza is greater than the than the relative value of a movie ticket. Now to move on, another function of money is that money serves as a medium of exchange, and you can use money as a means of exchange or a medium of exchange for purchasing any goods and services. Because money serves as a medium of exchange, actually money removes the problem of coincidence of wants, because everyone is willing to accept money in payment rather than goods and services. So the problem of coincidence of wants, for example, you give up 200 Newton 200 bills in exchange for a ticket to see a rock concert. So without money, if concert organizers wanted gold, but you only had silver, then there is the problem of coincidence of wants between the concert organizer and you, and uh, neither then can be there can be concert nor you can see the concert. So because money serves as a medium of exchange, so no one will refuse to trade their product for money. Now to talk about the types of money, there are in general two types of money: fiat money and commodity money. But uh, commodity money is no more used. In the past, it used to be there, but now it is not there. Fiat money is that money which has no intrinsic value. So the example of fiat money is the uh, currency that we have. For example, 100 Newton currency is a fiat money, and that has no intrinsic value. Its value is worth just uh, the paper. So if you really see, it has no intrinsic value, and that is why it is called fiat money. It is also called fiat money because it is established as a money by government's order or by government decree. And commodity money used to be there and used to be used for exchange of goods and services, and this was usually based on the exchange of goods with gold. So in the past, actually, people used gold as a money, and when we use a physical commodity as a medium of exchange, then it is called commodity money. Now, in your syllabus, there is what is called control of money and how money works. So now we have to talk about uh, money supply in order to understand the concept of money, control of money. So the quantity of money available in an economy is called the money supply. So in an economy that uses fiat money, the government controls the supply of money. And the legal restrictions give the government a monopoly on printing the money, and no other agencies can print money. So government control over the supply of money through policy instruments called monetary policy. And in Bhutan, the monetary policy is delegated to Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan, RMA. And in order to understand the concept of the control of money, we need to understand what is money supply. So money supply is defined in terms of two categories, M1 and M2. So M1 is called narrow definition of money supply, or it is also called transaction money. And M1 is nothing but it is the money that can be readily, it consists of the money that can be directly used for everyday transaction, like for example to buy petrol for car, groceries to eat, clothes to wear. And the money supply actually money supply M1 constitutes the currencies held by the general public or the public outside the banks or the people. So money supply M1 is equal to the currencies held by people in their hands plus checkable deposit, which is nothing but deposit account that is designed for everyday money transaction plus traveler's check. And M2 is referred to as broad definition of money supply, and it consists of M1 plus savings deposit plus small time deposit. So now there is a difference between checkable deposit and savings deposit. Checkable deposit is actually meant for uh, business people, for example, where people need to transact money every day, or they need to withdraw money from the bank every day, for example, time to time, quite often. Whereas savings deposit is meant saving the money, for saving the money and earn interest. Whereas checkable deposit account is not meant for earning interest but for ease of money transaction. So there is a difference between checkable deposit and savings deposit. Another difference uh, of checkable deposit from savings deposit is that checkable deposits earn lower interest rate because the uh, people who use this account uh, withdraw money very frequently from the bank. It actually uh, increases the cost of providing services. So because of that, the interest for checkable deposit is less compared to savings deposit. And the small time deposit refers to interest bearing accounts that requires withdrawal notice or must remain on deposit for specified period of time unless an early withdrawal penalty is paid. So small time deposits are those deposits or interest bearing accounts that requires a withdrawal notice to withdraw the money from the bank, or it must remain on deposit for certain specified period of time unless you want to draw early with some penalty. And an example of this small time deposit is certificate of deposit. Now to move on and talk about the principle of money supply in the economy. Generally, there are three groups that affect the supply of money in the economy. First, the central bank. Central bank is the government institution responsible for monetary policy. In case of Bhutan, it is RMA, Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan. Another group that affects the supply of money is the depository institutions like the banks, then these insurance companies, etc. So depository institutions like the banks that accept deposit from the public and makes loan to the public. Another group that affect the supply of money in the economy is the general public. So every person or firm except the banks that holds money either in the form of currency or in the form of deposits in the banks. Now, in order to again understand the concept of money supply in the economy, we need to understand the concept of government reserve system. So we can represent the government reserve system in the form of a balance sheet here. And the balance sheet consists of assets and liabilities. So in case of government reserve, the assets are nothing but the government securities like the bonds. Like for example, treasury bond. Another asset in the government reserve system is the discount loans. And the liabilities in the government reserve system are currencies in circulation, that refers to the amount of currency in the hands of the public, and the reserves, that represents the deposits at the central bank, plus the currency that is physically held by the banks, which are called vault cash. And the total of the currency in circulation and reserve is called monetary base, which is represented by MB equal to C plus R. And the government can actually control the supply of money through these two instruments or tools: government security and discount loans. So the government can actually control the monetary base here, or the currency in circulation and reserves, through these two instruments or tools: government securities and discount loans. So the government can actually uh, control the supply of money in the economy by actually either selling the government securities or purchasing the government securities. This is one way. For example, if government sells government securities, for example, treasury bonds, to the bank, then uh, banks will receive the treasury bond in return to the currency that the banks pay to the government or the central bank. That way, the currency is withdrawn from the economy or the supply of money decreases. So when government sells or issues bonds to the bank or the general public, then government actually takes out the currency from the banks or the general public, and that way it reduces the supply of money in the economy. Whereas if the government actually purchases the bonds from the public or the banks, then the government actually pumps in the money into the economy by actually uh, in in return to the bonds. So that is how the supply of money in the economy can be controlled by the government. So if you go a little bit detail on how central bank can exercise control over the money, then it can actually control through this through this through these three different ways: purchase or sale of government securities in the open market, called open market operation, or through its extension of discount loans to banks, or by changing what is called required reserve ratio, which we will see in the later part. So this the control of the supply of money through purchase or sale of government securities I have already explained. So if you actually sell the government securities, then government is actually withdrawing the money from the economy or taking out the money from the economy or removing the money from the economy in exchange for the bonds. Whereas if the government purchases the government securities or bonds from the general public or the depositories, then the government is actually pumping in money into the economy in return or in exchange with the government securities or bonds. So government also can actually increase the supply of money through extension of discount loans to bank. So the central bank can actually provide uh, discount loans to the banks and then provide the money or the currencies to the banks, and that money can be circulated into the economy. Government also can change the money supply through changes in what is called required reserve ratio, which you can see in the later slides. Now, in order to understand how banks create money, we need to first understand the concept of 100% reserve banking system and fractional reserve banking system. In case of 100% reserve banking system, banks would not be able to create money by making loans, because then the central bank or the government will require 100% of the deposits made by the general public to be maintained as deposits in the central bank, and the banks will be left with no money to provide loans to the general public. So that is 100% reserve banking system. So if the economy or country runs with the system of 100% reserve banking system, then banks cannot create money. When we talk about creating money here by the banks, we are not talking about printing money. The authority for printing money is reserved with central bank only, and banks cannot print paper bills. So in case of 100% reserve banking system of an economy, banks cannot create money. And I don't think anywhere in the world now, in this modern world, there is the system of 100% reserve banking system. So now in the modern economy, the banking system used is called fractional reserve banking system. So in this case, the whatever the deposits are made by the general public in the bank, they only need to keep certain percentage of their deposit on reserve as vault cash and deposits at the central bank, not the whole amount. So in that case, whatever percentage of the deposits made by the general public in the bank are required to be kept as reserve with the central bank, then the rest of the money can be actually used to provide loans to the general public, and then banks can create money. So holding less than 100% on reserve allows banks to make loans to other people who take loans from the people who actually deposit in the same bank to create money in the economy. Now, in order to understand how banks create money, let us look at an example. For example, Bank A. For Bank A, for example, a person P1 comes and makes a deposit in its account, in Bank A's account, a nultum of 100,000. Then, as per the government's requirement or as per the central bank's requirement, for example, the central bank requires a reserve ratio of 10%, then this Bank A needs to keep a reserve of 10% of 100,000, which is 10,000, with the central bank. And this required reserve of Newton 10,000 with the central bank cannot be used by Bank A for making loans or for other purposes. But on demand, they can claim the 10,000 Newton from the central bank. Then, out of the 100,000 Newton deposited by person P1 in Bank A, 10,000 Newton goes as a required reserve, and the excess reserve left with the Bank A is Newton 100,000 minus 10,000, which gives 90,000. So now if you total, you will get 90,000 excess reserve plus 10,000 required reserve. Total it will give you 100,000 Newton here, and the total here is also 100,000 Newton. So that way the Bank A's balance sheet is equal. Now, Bank A has an excess reserve of 90,000 neutron, which if other people in the economy wants to take a loan can take the loan, and Bank A can provide a loan worth neutron 90,000. So if you see here, for example, another person P2 comes in to Bank A and takes a loan from Bank A, takes a loan of neutron 90,000. Then the Bank A creates an account for person P2 worth neutron 90,000. And the excess reserve, initially it was 90,000, and now because the Bank A needs to keep a required reserve of 10%, then the 10% of 90,000 is equal to 9,000, and that is how you get 19,000 here. 10,000 required reserve from the P1 person P1's account plus the 10% required reserve from the person P2's account of 9,000. So 10,000 plus 9,000 here gives 19,000 required reserve. Because because the required reserve increases by 9,000 here, the excess reserve reduces by the same amount here. So 90,000 minus 9,000, which will give you plus 81,000. So when you provide a loan of neutron 90,000 to this person P2, then you are actually adding a sum of neutron 90,000 in the economy, and because of that there is a change in M1. So in the earlier case there is no change in M1. So M1 is nothing but currency held outside bank plus checkable deposit plus traveler check. So in this case there are no travelers check, there are no checkable deposits, the the currencies the currencies in the hands of the public is being deposited here. The uh, same currencies in the hand of the public is being deposited here. So there is no change in the money supply M1 here. Whereas here, in this case, because you are providing a loan of 90,000 to another person, then you are actually increasing the supply of money by 90,000. So when this person P2 withdraws 90,000 neutron, then a sum of neutron 90,000 is pumped into the economy. But please remember that this 90,000 is the money. 90,000 neutron is coming from the excess reserve from what was deposited by person P1 here. It is not that bank A is printing the money and there is an additional 90,000 neutron being pumped into the economy. So that is how there is a change in money supply because of the banking activity. And now if you total, you get 190,000 here and 190,000 here, same. So 19,000 reserve plus 81,000 excess reserve plus the 90,000 reserve, I mean the loan here in the loan account of bank A will give you total of 190,000, and the total here is also the amount deposited by person P1 plus the amount deposited in person P2's account by the bank of 90,000, which is equal to 190,000 here. Now the supply of money contributed by the three actors in the economy: the central bank, the depository institution, the public, can be actually developed into a mathematical model, which is given by this formula for money supply: M is equal to small m into MB, and the variable m, small m, in this formula is called the money multiplier, which tells us how much the money supply changes for a given change in the monetary base. And monetary base is nothing but the currency in circulation plus the total reserve in banking system. This money multiplier tells us what multiple of monetary base will be transformed into money supply. And as you saw in the earlier slides, so there are factors affecting the money supply, money multiplier, like the depositor's decision about holding of currency and checkable deposit. If the general public makes a decision to hold the money in paper currencies in their uh, lockers, then that will have one effect. If they deposit that money into the bank in the form of checkable deposit, then that will have another effect, because when the same money that was held in the hands of the general public is deposited in the bank, then the banks can actually create further money by providing loans, as you saw in the earlier slides. So money supply can also be changed through reserve requirements imposed by central bank. So when required reserve is changed by the central bank, then the amount of loan that the banks can actually provide to the general public changes. If, for example, in this case, if the required reserve ratio is 5%, then the required reserve will change from 10,000 to 5,000 plus 4,000 4,500. So when this changes, then the amount of loan that the bank can provide changes. I think you will understand better from here. If the required reserve ratio is 5%, then the required reserve here with the central bank of the bank A will be 5,000 here, and the excess reserve will be 95 here, and this 95,000 can be provided as loan to another person, and when another person takes a loan of 95,000, then the change in M1 will be 95,000 instead of 90,000. So the currency in circulation is 95,000, and that is how the money supply changes in the economy. Okay, so money supply can also be affected by the bank's decision about excess reserve. What the banks want to do with the excess reserve? Do the banks want to provide the excess reserve as loans to the general public? Then there will be change in the money supply. as you saw in this example, because the money deposited by person P1 provided an excess reserve of 90,000 Newton. The bank A could actually provide loan to the second person P2 of 90,000, and that led to the change in the money supply of 90,000 Newton in the economy here, which is represented by the change in M1 here. So all these factors then can be actually condensed into a factor called money multiplier, and that money multiplier is actually given by this formula, where M is equal to 1 plus C divided by R plus E plus C, where C is nothing but the currency ratio, which is given by the currency in circulation divided by the checkable deposit, which you saw here, C and the deposit. Currency in circulation and the deposit here. So where C is given by currency in circulation divided by the checkable deposit deposited by the general public, and excess reserve ratio, which is given by the excess reserve here. For example, the 90,000 here divided by the checkable deposit, which is here, checkable deposit and excess reserve here, 90,000, and required reserve ratio is the required reserve ratio, which is actually specified by the central bank, which you see here, one example, 10% here. So money multiplier is given by this formula, 1 plus C divided by R plus E plus C, the C here. So here is an example with which we can calculate the money multiplier. For example, let the required reserve ratio be 10% and currency in circulation is 400 billion and the checkable deposit is 800 billion. Then the required reserve ratio is given by and if the excess reserve ratio, if the excess reserve is 0.8 billion, then the money supply M1 is equal to C plus D, the reserve, which is equal to 400 plus 800 billion, 1200 billion. So from this we can calculate C, E and M. So if you calculate, then we get the C equal to 0.5 and E equal to 0.001, and putting the values of C, E and R in this formula, then you get money multiplier of 2.5. And what this money multiplier of 2.5 tells us is that given the required reserve ratio of 10% on checkable deposit and the behavior of depositors, which is represented by C here, which is equal to 0.5, and the behavior of bank here, which is represented by E here, sum of neutrum 1, increase in sum of neutrum 1 in the monetary base leads to 2.5 neutrum increase in the supply of money, which is M1. That is what it means by this money multiplier 2.5, or in other words, the monetary base will increase or decrease or change by 2.5, by a factor of 2.5. That is what it means. Okay, so we'll stop here. Thank you.